What if one of history's most famous villains isn't who we've been told he is? In I Was Not Satan, the real story of Lucifer, Dr. W. J. Brendel traces the story of Lucifer through ancient texts, biblical translations, folklore, and centuries of tradition to separate documented history from popular belief. If you enjoy exploring mysteries with evidence instead of assumptions, this book will challenge what you think you know. I Was Not Satan, the real story of Lucifer is available now on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and other major booksellers. Learn more at wjbrendel.com.
Welcome to Forever Paranormal, where shadows remember and silence has a way of speaking. I'm Dr. Bill, your guide through the strange and the unexplainable.
And I'm Deb. Every week we dig into what hides between belief and proof. Cryptids, hauntings, witchcraft, UFO sightings, and the stories people swear are true.
We don't tell you what to believe. We just look at what's possible, what's been witnessed, and what refuses to stay quiet.
If you like what we do, follow, rate, and share the show. It helps keep the lights on.
And if you want to go deeper, step inside the crypt. Patreon members get the show ad-free, a full day early, and gain access to our entire archives, years of investigations, bonus episodes, and conversations we don't release anywhere else. You can join at foreverparanormal.com or by searching Forever Paranormal The Crypt on Patreon.
And remember that you're never alone. If you ever need someone to talk to, the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is 988.
There are moments when history quietly slips past us. A few seconds in a television documentary, a sentence buried in an old newspaper, a forgotten government report sitting in a file cabinet for decades. Sometimes that's all it takes to uncover a story almost nobody remembers. This week, we're telling one of those stories. Welcome back to Forever Paranormal, where we know Natina is more than a myth, and every story is a door between worlds. And this week we're stepping through the mystery surrounding a Colorado Air National Guard training mission that ended in tragedy and left behind questions that still haven't been fully answered. Well, hello there, my mysterious co-host.
Hello.
So, did you want to ask me a question, tell us something, or give something we don't know about yet?
I do have news. I keep seeing tidbits and teasers on YouTube and Google regarding the X-Files reboot being a real possibility. I love that show. I think it's exciting news and hope that it does come to fruition. I wonder how the recent declassification in releases could impact the show. Could it be interesting?
Yeah, it might be interesting. But I know one thing I saw was the Lego set to come out. I don't know if that's the true reboot or not, but they have a X-Files Lego set now.
No, I think that was separate from a possible reboot of the show.
Okay, well that sounds pretty cool. Yeah, that was a great show back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
But I wonder if they still have the same characters, same actors, I should say.
I don't know.
I don't know, but we'll go ahead and move on because, Deb, you may know or you may not know, but this episode actually has a story behind the story. And I think it's worth sharing because it explains why we're talking about a crash that most people, including me until recently, had never heard of. A while back, I was watching UFO Witness, and for just a few seconds they mentioned a mid-air collision involving two Colorado Air National Guard jets back in 1975. They didn't spend much time on it before moving on, but I have to admit, it caught my attention immediately because my first thought was, how have I never heard of this?
That's usually how it starts with you. Somebody mentions something, and 3 weeks later, you've gone down 10,000 rabbit holes and downloaded everything you can get a hold of.
Well, yeah, you're not wrong. I mean, I started digging as soon as the episode was over. I mean, the problem was I didn't have much to go on. They only mentioned the case for a few seconds. So I watched that segment again and again and again. I got on YouTube and I kept trying to catch the year, the pilot's name, and anything that might help me track it down. Even with all of that, I came up empty. I mean, there wasn't a book. There weren't detailed articles. I couldn't find a comprehensive account of the crash. It was like the story had almost disappeared.
So you hit a dead end.
Yeah, pretty much. Then I remembered the researcher they interviewed on the show. That's when I decided to take a chance and I reached out to Katie Paige. She's the former Colorado State Director for MUFON. And she'd been studying this case for years. And I figured the worst she could do was just ignore my email. Instead, she wrote back. Not with a couple of links, not with a short explanation. I mean, she shared years of research she'd put together herself.
That's very generous.
It is. I mean, she spent years collecting newspaper articles, military documents, timelines, witness interviews, Freedom of Information Act material, and a mountain of historical records surrounding this crash. She told me she'd uncovered connections that reached far beyond this single event, but she also understood that I wanted to focus on the collision itself for now. The only thing she asked was that I covered her research. I gave her the proper credit, which I'm doing, and include Rocky Mountain Ranch research in the show notes, which it will be, and I had absolutely no problem agreeing to that.
That's refreshing. A lot of people spend years researching something and guard it with Fort Knox-like security.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Katie wanted people to know about this case. She wasn't interested in keeping it to herself. And here's one of the things that kind of struck me cute. Katie also mentioned she had seen some of my books and asked if I'd send her a signed copy of Dark Magic. After everything she shared with me, that wasn't much of a request. I was happy to send it, and I can say now that she has received it. So before we go any farther, I want to publicly thank Katie Paige for trusting me with her research and making this episode possible. Without her, I don't think we'd be having this conversation right now.
Well, now that you've got my attention, because if somebody spends years researching one military accident, there has to be a reason.
That's exactly what I thought. Now, to be fair and completely clear, Katie's research extends well beyond this crash. She believes November 11th, 1975 was one of the most remarkable days in modern UFO history, with several significant events occurring within hours of one another. But we're not going to go there today. But I will say this, though. She sent me down quite the rabbit hole, and she and I may explore that story together sometime in the future. Today, we're staying focused on the Colorado Air National Guard collision.
So where are we?
Colorado, November 11th, 1975. The Colorado Air National Guard was conducting what should have been a routine night training mission. The aircraft involved were A-7D Corsair 2s, single-seat attack jets designed for precision strike missions. They weren't experimental airplanes or anything like that, and they weren't being flown by inexperienced pilots. This was the kind of mission aviators trained for over and over again. In the years that followed, the crash was largely forgotten outside a small circle of researchers who refused to let the story disappear.
Well, were they flying as a pair?
Yeah, they were, an instructor pilot and his student. And when you say instructor and student, they're both experienced pilots. You just have to have a leader and a follower when you're doing a training mission like that, right? And the formation flying they were doing after dark demands an incredible amount of concentration because your visual references are limited. Instead of seeing the whole airplane clearly, you're often relying on navigation lights, rotating beacons, silhouettes, and constant communication because everything has to work together. The moment something breaks that rhythm, things go downhill very quickly.
I don't think most people realize how different that is from driving at night. You, as a driver, you can just pull over if something doesn't look right.
Yeah, you're exactly right, because it's several hundred miles an hour. There isn't much time to stop and think. Air brakes, nah, they don't work that way. And that's what makes this case so compelling. If you only read the headlines, it's a tragic military incident. If you read the official records, you learn how investigators believe the collision happened. But when you start looking at the material Katie uncovered over the years, another question begins to emerge. Not how the airplanes collided, but why they ended up on a collision course in the first place. And that's where this story begins to take an unexpected turn.
So, if we're going to understand this, I guess the next step is figuring out exactly what happened that night.
Exactly. I mean, before we look at any alternative possibilities, we need to walk through the events the way the Air Force reconstructed them. Whether you ultimately agree with their conclusions or not, this is the foundation everything else is built on.
If the official report explains how the collision happened, where does it actually begin?
Well, it begins with something that sounds almost routine. Two jets entered the traffic pattern to practice approaches and landing. This wasn't unusual. I mean, military pilots fly patterns over and over and over until the procedures become second nature to them. That's one reason this case fascinated me. Nothing about the mission itself was extraordinary until one pilot couldn't find the other pilot. According to the Air Force investigation, the instructor lost visual contact with the student's aircraft. At night, that's a much bigger problem than people might realize. You aren't looking at a brightly lit airplane. You're trying to maintain awareness using a handful of lights against a dark sky, all while flying your own aircraft. I mean, this was a time before pilots even used night vision to fly with.
So, the first problem wasn't a collision, it was simply losing sight of the other airplane.
Yeah, and that's an important distinction because everything that follows starts there. The instructor knew he needed to relocate the student's aircraft before continuing the training exercise. Over the radio, he transmitted a simple instruction concerning the rotating beacon. The investigation concluded that the instructor believed the student's beacon was not on, it was turned off. The student, however, interpreted the transmission differently than what the instructor intended. Instead of understanding his request to illuminate the beacon, he believed he was being told to turn it off.
Sounds like one of those things that's almost unbelievable until you remember they're doing all of this in the cockpit of a military jet.
Right, they're busy, they're moving fast. Nobody gets to rewind the radio and hear it again. When I first read the report, I wasn't looking for anything mysterious. I was trying to understand how investigators reconstructed the sequence. Reading it that way, you can follow their logic from one event to the next. The instructor loses sight of the student. There's confusion over the beacon. Now the instructor has to find the student again.
And he thinks he does?
That's exactly what the Air Force concluded. I mean, the report does state that the instructor acquired what he believed was his student's aircraft and maneuvered accordingly. In reality, though, the investigators determined he had mistaken another rotating beacon for his student's position. That mistaken identification set the final events into motion.
So, from the Air Force's perspective, that's the whole case.
Pretty much, their conclusion is that once the instructor identified the wrong light, the rest happened very quickly. Two airplanes converged, they collided, and both pilots were forced to eject. Fortunately, though, I will say, both men survived. Had they not, we probably wouldn't know nearly as much about those final moments as we do.
If I stopped listening right now, I'd say it sounds like a tragic accident caused by a series of misunderstandings.
Well, yeah, that's completely reasonable conclusion, Deb, because that's essentially what the Air Force determined. But here's where Katie's years of research begin asking a different question. The report explains why the instructor turned toward the wrong beacon. It doesn't ask what may have caused the formation to come apart before the sequence ever began, and why there was a third beacon to begin with. And that's where the possibility of the other object enters the story.
Okay, so here's where you've lost me a little. The Air Force investigated the accident. They explained how the collision happened. So why did Katie spend years researching this one crash?
Because she noticed something that I completely missed the first time I read the report. Actually, I think most people would.
Before we get to the beacon, though, help me with something. If these two jets were flying together, how did they get separated in the first place?
Well, according to the report, the student accelerated to rejoin the instructor as they entered another traffic pattern. Somewhere during that rejoin, the instructor lost sight of him. That becomes the turning point in the entire investigation because everything that follows happens after visual contact is lost.
So from that point on, the instructor is trying to relocate his student.
Exactly. And that's what leads us to the question that stopped me cold when I read the report. So I was reading along, following the sequence of events in this report, when I got to the part where the instructor reacquires what he believes is the student's aircraft. The report says he mistook another rotating beacon for the student's airplane and maneuvered towards it. So I remember stopping right there.
Why?
Because I realized the report never answered the question that immediately popped into my head. If it wasn't the student's rotating beacon, whose beacon was it?
Wait a minute. The report actually says there was another rotating beacon?
It does, and that's what got my attention. The report explains that the instructor believed he had reacquired the student's aircraft. The investigators later concluded that he had mistaken another beacon for the student's airplane. He maneuvered towards it. He encountered jet wash, and seconds later, the two A-7s collided. He ran right into the student's plane.
But if the beacon wasn't coming from the student's airplane, where was it coming from?
Exactly. That's the right question. The report identifies the mistake. It never clearly identifies the source of the beacon that led to it. It assumes it may have been an aircraft, but it doesn't state positively. Now, maybe investigators believe they didn't need to. Their job was determining why two military aircraft collided, and they reached a conclusion that they were satisfied with. Katie looked at the same report and asked a different question. What was the instructor actually looking at?
That's a pretty important question.
Well, I think so too, because if there was another aircraft in that position, you'd expect the report to identify it, right? If there wasn't another aircraft, then what produced the rotating beacon the instructor reported seeing? That's the gap Katie spent years trying to understand.
So this is where the possibility of the other object comes in.
Right. Not because the report says it was a UFO. It doesn't. Not because Katie claimed a UFO caused the collision. She doesn't. The possibility comes from trying to identify the source of a rotating beacon that the official report itself never fully explains. Katie believes that beacon may have belonged to the other object. Whether she's right or not is something each listener has to decide after looking at the evidence.
I actually like approaching it that way. You're not asking people to reject the Air Force investigation. You're asking them to notice something that's in it.
Exactly. The report tells us how the collision happened. Katie asks whether it was also unintentionally documented, something that investigators couldn't identify. Those are two different questions. One doesn't automatically cancel the other out. And that's why I found this case so compelling. Not because I walked away convinced I knew the answer, because I walked away realizing I couldn't answer a very simple question. Who or what produced the other rotating beacon? And I want to thank Katie Paige once again for trusting me with years of her research and documentation. Without her generosity, I never would have discovered this case, and neither would many of you listeners. If you'd like to explore her work further, do it for yourself. We'll include a link to the Rocky Mountain Ranch research in our show notes. She's got some remarkable stuff they do out there. So until next time, when we discuss another tale yet to be told. Thanks for listening to Forever Paranormal. Follow, rate, and share the show. It helps others find us and keeps the stories coming. Step inside the crypt for archive and exclusive episodes at foreverparanormal.com. And keep up with my latest books and research at wjbrendel.com. And until next time, remember, the veil is always thinner than you think.